Welcome to Truth Be Told. I'm Dwight and this is Max, and we're glad to have you back with us again, whether you're on Spotify or YouTube or whatever mode that you're listening, watching, joining us. And we just finished off the last session. We were talking about people that try to gatekeep God.
Mm,
And when Max was talking about that, one of his friends, grandmother, someone had gone to a church or denomination or whatever it was, and there were those um, that basically wanted to gatekeep, and I think if the fact that if we're the only right people, that's kind of where that comes
mm,
from in this area. But when you were saying that, I was thinking about the show Chosen, and in that show, they do a wonderful job of exposing the Pharisees, and they expose the Pharisees for wanting to gatekeep.
mm,
They want to be the ones in charge of who's
mm.
actually getting into God's kingdom, who knows God, walks with God, fellowships with God,
Yeah.
and how easily though we can fall into that.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
And that
Yep.
we ourselves can fall into that fact that we're the ones that know we've got this inside view or this inside track with God, rather than the fact that that God's a welcoming God,
Mhm.
and that God's actually seeking us. We find that going back into the Older Testament, in Genesis chapter number 3, Adam and Eve, God gives them a free will, gives them a free choice, and we talk about free will, sovereignty of God, and so on, and so we see
Mm,
that, and yet God didn't make us robots. He didn't make us mere mimics of this, and He made us with a relationship. We made us for a relationship
yeah.
with Him, and then when Adam and Eve break that relationship, when they place their will over his will, God doesn't leave them on their own.
Mhm.
He God doesn't gatekeep.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't get yeah, and it changes everything, but it's not limited to certain people. Um, yeah, I think a couple thoughts. It's like um and I experience that even, if I learn something or if I feel like he's speaking to me in a certain way and I learned, I'm reading in the word and he's like reveals something and then it's like, oh, okay, that's what that means. And then I explain that to somebody or we're talking about something and they have a challenging thought towards that or they see it in a slightly different way or they're revealed something different but it can add to it. It sometimes can be like, well, I thought my way was the only, my thought was the only right thought. But I think when you start to discuss talking with people, um, you, I was talking to another guy actually about this. We were chatting about, um, if we hear a message or we hear something, or we both read the same passage, God could be speaking three different things to different people because of where they're at.
Yeah, so that's one application or one interpretation rather,
Mm-hmm.
and different applications. And as a speaker, oftentimes I'll speak a message and someone will come out afterwards and say, wow, God really spoke to me in that message about this area. And I go, man, I don't even remember talking about that. That wasn't one of my main thoughts, my main aims. But the Spirit of God was at work, taking the Word of God and causing it to be alive, to be to them, and to meet them where they are, right? And joining this with another thought is um, how welcoming God is, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly. I think because of that relationship that he has right from the very beginning, and wants with us. Um, I've wrestled with this myself, is knowing that. I am loved as a son.
Mm,
I'm not yes, I am part of the sons and daughters of Christ, but as a son. I think sometimes it's like I can easily just graze over that and don't realize how important his relationship with each one of us, how much emphasis he puts on that and wants with us. The openness, um, because I think when you have, a good relationship with your father, um, or even a friend, there's an openness in that relationship where you can talk about things you normally wouldn't be able to talk about with other people. And I think sometimes it feels like, or it has felt like in the past where, um, and I think maybe when we're in the middle of a dark period of our life, it can feel like God's not open or doesn't want to talk to us, or other people have painted that picture in our life that it's like we're in a place that we can't actually achieve that or get to that place.
yeah,
But he wants that first because he meets us where we're at.
yeah,
And I think then that's also what I'm called to do for other people is meet them where they're at because that's the only way that they can actually see that God can meet them where they're at.
yeah. When you're saying that, I typed in here to my in my notes, the 2 words: relational God.
Hmm.
And not only is God a welcoming God, and he's a forgiving God, and all of that is wrapped up in this relationship, right?
Hmm.
You cannot have a relationship with someone, number one, that you're not willing to forgive, or that's not willing to forgive you.
Yeah.
And so you hold them at bay. And if God
Mm-hmm.
was that kind of a God, and we see God, we see God as a welcoming God, we see God as a relational God, we see God as a forgiving God, right in the very beginning of his word when he comes to Adam and Eve. And I've often said, when, especially when I'm speaking with teens, and I share with them that, how that the one rule that God had given to them, they had blown that, and God could have easily come into the garden and say, "You know what? I'm done with you."
Hmm.
But his whole story of redemption, this wonderful, incredible story of God being a redeeming God, and he accepts us where we are. Now, that doesn't mean that he accepts our sin or as it is. He's
Hmm.
going to do something about that. That's the whole part of redemption, right? And he's such a welcoming God that he doesn't wait. He doesn't wait until that Adam and Eve go, yeah, we really blew this. We should get on our hands and knees and come
Yeah.
to God and beg and plead and so on for forgiveness, and see if God would perhaps forgive us.
Hmm.
And God doesn't wait for that at all. God comes and he enters into the garden and he meets them where they are. Are you glad that God always meets us where we are? And I think back, in my life, and I go, I'm glad that God met me where I was,
Yeah.
not where I had hoped to be.
Exactly. Hmm. Yeah, because I think that's easily lost. I think one of the lies that the evil one plants in our minds as uh, followers of Christ, but also those that have never followed or anything, and that is it's to keep them out of that, to make it much more bigger and something that they can never become a part of, and that's not true.
Yeah.
I was another convers or my one friend had an analogy. Can't usually say that word. And I never really thought of it like this before, but he used 2 balls of clay. You got two balls of clay. One, they look identical from the outside, and he's referring to when we become um, a follower of Jesus. Basically, we're born again, and truly born again. So basically, like the scriptures say, believe, or sorry, um, believe, be baptized, and through that process, and When you begin to follow Jesus, you become a new creation. Old things are passing away. So, ball of clay, you start tearing it apart, you just have a ball of clay. When you become a believer, the ball of clay looks identical to it. And he's using that. I know clay's used in a lot of different ways for the way God shapes us and everything, but he's using it in a way that's like there's a figurine inside of the ball of clay as the new creation. And that's what you don't necessarily see a difference on the outside immediately. And the clay still sticks to us sometimes when we're working through that and following him and allowing him to cleanse us from that. So you don't see that until you start peeling it away. Um, I just thought it was very unique, a little bit of a different spin on it. And I shared it with some friends and they were like, that makes, it just sets something new in their minds because it's when you believe you're now different, but it doesn't always appear that
Yeah, I
at the
think,
beginning.
yeah, it's a great analogy, Max. And I think of that. Paul writes in one of his epistles, he said, we have this treasure
Mhm.
in earthen vessels, right? And that, you know, the more and more that God refines us, God's working with this clay, and the more and more that we look like Jesus, and that becomes part of that, begin to see what that, that hidden part that God is doing there.
Totally. Yeah. It's in there. Anyway, we got more clay coming in the next episode. So thanks for joining us on this one. And I hope you have a good night, evening, wherever you're at.